I mean, we have read so much about you, about your work. I mean, a freelance writer, an adventure blogger. I just can't wait to hear all about your adventures and just how you got there. So we know it's like one of the adventures that you talked about was going to Laos with your family, and that being the first place, the first time you ever went to Laos with your family, especially because Laos isn't the country where you were born in. So
Yep.
I want to hear more about that. But first, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit more about, what your life was before you became a writer, publisher, and an outdoor adventure blogger.
Okay, sure. Yep, first generation Lao American. What my life was before I became a writer was, everything that your parents tell you you're supposed to do, right? So going to college, taking your academics seriously and getting your degree. And then I was in the corporate world in corporate finance for almost my entire 20s. So, I was doing annuities and, working on teams. And I had always done writing on the side. It was something that, I did as a hobby, and I would write, free articles for websites, for magazines. And turns out that those articles did pretty well. So I thought to myself, I've done everything by the book. I've, you know, finished college and I'm here in this finance career. But if my articles did this well with me just doing it on the side, then I wondered to myself, how well could they do if I did it at 100%? So that's when I did something crazy, and I just kind of thought, and then I waited, and I went to my boss and said, I'd like to give my 2 weeks notice. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go write. And he said, are you crazy? Writers don't make money. And I said, there's just, if I don't do it now, I just won't know. And, I did everything, like I said, I did everything by the book. So now I want to do things on my terms, and I'm in a good place right now. I really think that I want to give this a go. And hey, you know what? I'll tell you what, if I don't make it, then I'll come back to you in a year. And I never went back.
Oh, you're muted, Wakanda.
Uh-oh.
Sorry, and it's been more than a year. How long has it been?
Almost two now. Almost two.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you were writing on the side during your full-time job, talk to me a little bit more about the articles you were writing. And when you say that it's been doing well, talk to me a little bit more about that. Talk to us a little bit more
Yeah,
about.
let's dive into that. So, because I was born in Colorado, grew up with my dad taking us like fishing and camping, and we couldn't afford like flights to Disneyland. So we went on a lot of like outdoor adventure in our state. And so growing up, like that was all I knew. I had a lot of knowledge about that. And Colorado is the mecca for the outdoor lifestyle. So I was writing articles, like my very first article I did was for a Denver magazine. And I pitched this story to them. I said, hey, I'm not an established writer, but I'm trying to get out there. If I pitch you a story, will you print this? And I won't charge you anything. I'll do it for free. So I wrote an article about 3 hidden treasures you can find driving on Independence Pass, which is a very famous road to go to Aspen. And the hidden treasures were a cave, an ice cave, a cliff jump, like for cliff diving, and the Cascade waterfalls. And these are hidden. They're hidden along that road, and a lot of people didn't know about them. Well, they published the article, and it had thousands of shares and tons of comments, and it got this enormous amount of feedback. And I thought to myself, okay, well, this makes sense. I live in a state where people are eager to do these things, and I have all the knowledge. So why don't I share it, because I already love doing it, and let's see what else I can put out there. So
Wow,
that's
I'm
kind of how it all
definitely
started.
excited to go to Colorado and find all of those three gems. I mean,
Yes.
Colorado is on my list of where I want to travel, and I'm not surprised that it's like the mecca of all these outdoor events that you mentioned, and it's so rewarding to be able to read these articles from someone like you to, you know, someone who like you in the narrative portrait that you did for the Lao project, you mentioned that this was a field you want to get into regardless whether there isn't a woman like you, a Lao American woman to be exact, like you in this field, but yet you still went for it, and you're paving the way for other Lao American women to do it. So I want to hear more about your thought process in having this strength to just go for it, even though you don't see others like you in that field.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that we're touching on that topic. That's really big. I noticed that another part of me trying to leave finance industry into becoming a writer, you're going into writing, well, I'm sorry, I'm going into writing without a journalism background, without that type of education, because like I said, I was in a different industry. So going into this new industry, it meant that I had to start from scratch, right? I had to go into like, be in my 30s and go do internships. I had to, with a lot of other young people. I had to go to networking events. I had to go and try to introduce myself and meet other writers. I had to find, it's a lot of like kind of networking and getting your feet wet, right? Well, the first thing that I noticed immediately was that it was really rare to find women of color, let alone, Lao Americans. So it felt like, gosh, I was just this small thing in this like really big, new industry. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a little older and like no one looks like me. Like, I don't even know how I'm going to like set myself apart or, I'm up against these really established writers to be pitching articles to magazines. So, I had to remind myself that it didn't matter. You have to kind of have almost blinders on because if you pay attention to those sort of, you know, small little nuances like, oh, nobody looks like me, or like, "Ugh, there's nobody here like me," well, that gives you all the more reason to be there. If there's nobody that looks like you, you've got to be there then. You've got to be the one to break that because uh, if someone's not in that space, that's very telling that someone should be. And it really, if anything, it drove me to say, you know what, I can write just as good, I can do just as well, and I'm gonna really show them that. And what's really rewarding about writing is that you see it in print, right? It's in like, it comes to fruition. So when I pitch and pitch and pitch and people are like, I'm not sure, like, you're not really experienced, I'm not sure, and I just kept throwing out more and more ideas no matter how many they turned down, eventually someone's going to say yes, and then it gets printed, and then there's this instant gratification that, boom, you wake up and before you know it, you're like me, and you have an entire book of a portfolio of different articles and different websites you've written for. And it's really satisfying because you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, I built that. Nobody no I didn't wait for anybody to tell me if I was allowed or not allowed. Instead, it was like I gave myself that permission.
Yeah, I'm glad that you bring up those certain challenges as a writer, Amber, um, and just reading some of your work as sort of getting to know you. I came across your article, "The Independence of a Lao American Woman," and you talk a lot about the challenges of not only being a Lao American woman, being a writer, but also the challenges of what your family thinks, right? Because like you
Yeah.
said, you brought up coming from corporate world to now becoming a freelance self-published writer, and talking about doing things for free. And so wondering if you could speak on behalf of that. I know that a lot of, at least in the Gen Z community as well, in the Latin American communities, that there's a lot of apprehension sometimes to be quote unquote successful in your parents' eyes, right? And so wondering how you sort of navigated that conversation with your parents to be like, this is what I really want to do, this is my passion, and I'm going for it, I'm going to make it work for myself.
No, I'm so glad you're bringing up this topic. So here's the thing: as I got older, I began to realize something. Now, when your parents come from a country like Laos, right? It's the mindset is different. The culture is different, obviously, but the mindset of careers is very different. Here's an example. When my parents came to the US, their mindset is, I don't care what job I do, I need to survive and I need to make sure my kids are good. And so with parents like that, their mentality is just do the job no matter what job it is and it pays you. And it's a survival tactic, right? It's all about their, you know, they come from refugee camps, they come from communism. They're all about that survival mode, right? And they cleaned toilets at the university for 23 years and didn't have a single complaint, didn't you know, they were just grateful that they had work. And now you've got the children, right, in this generation that have a totally different mindset, right? Now our mindset is, well, we want to do something that fulfills us. We want to do something that's purposeful. And you talk to your parents about that and they're like, what are you talking about? Like, who cares if it's, you know, like, what are you talking about? You want to fulfill yourself, just pay your bills, right?
Right.
Um, but, and that's really just a mindset thing and a generational thing. And for me, I really had to explain to my parents that, hey, at the end of the day, this is the one and only life I'm going to live. And I did it your way. I did it by the book. I did it the way you wanted it. I didn't like that. I didn't like the way I woke up and went to work every day. I didn't feel good about myself when I came home. I started changing as a person and I was constantly, you know, I was starting to change. I was becoming upset and angry. It was changing me, you know, inside. And I felt like, you know, okay, now's the time for me to find a way to do something that I genuinely love and find a way to be good at it. And if I can make money, then, you know, that's all win-win outcomes, right? And so that dialogue doesn't end with your parents. It really doesn't. It's just they want to make sure you're good. They mean well, right? But you know, again, that dialogue, it's there's no understanding because there's this wall, right? It's a wall of like survival or, you know, do I want to make money having fun? So
Yeah.
yeah, because really it's like, okay, let me go hiking and let me go camping and write about it and then get paid for it. And they're like, what? Yeah,
Mhm.
doesn't sound real, right?
Right,
So
but it sounds like you are proving more and more to them that you can have fun. You can make a living off of how you want to live.
yeah,
And that is so important. And I know one of the and Chase can pull this up soon, a photo. You even asked your family and your parents to join you along on the adventures, you know?
yes,
And
yeah,
so one of the photos here that I want to talk about that you submitted for the Law Project is a photo of you and your parents right in Laos with
yes.
an elephant. So I want to hear more about what I thought really pulled me there was,
Yay.
and here it is. Yeah. So what really pulled me into your piece was when you mentioned that walking through the streets, smelling similar foods that your mom made growing up was very nice, and that is something that I don't experience walking the streets of America. Like you walking the streets of Laos, you smell like Lao food in the air. When you know that is an experience that I want to have.
Oh my gosh. If we had an entire episode on just the country, the visit to Laos, I could do it. I could talk about it forever, because it was that significant for me. So this trip was really special because I had noticed that, you know, by the way, my parents are retired now, but I had noticed that growing up and into adulthood, that I would watch my parents go to Laos and go to Thailand, but it was always this large gap of time, right? Like they'd go and then maybe 8 or 9 years later, they'd go again. And it was always like these large gaps of time when they can go and treat themselves to a visit. Well, you know, I found it really important for me to do something nice and kind of pay them back for all that they've done for me growing up. And I had had this idea to save up enough money to buy everybody's tickets. So I bought everybody's flight and I contacted my mom and dad and I said, hey, all you need is spending money, which is, by the way, like nothing in Laos and Thailand.
Right.
Um, and I said, you just need spending money, pack your bags, and let's go. And we went for a month, and it was the most, I mean, I just want to say like emotional, spiritual. It was just, I didn't want to come home. And really, I think there's a combination of things. I guess the best way to put it is when I was a child, growing up, it's like you're smelling your mom's food. She cooks every day. That is what she's doing when you get home from school. That's what you're raised with. And then, you know, you speak the language with your parents, and it's you're all encompassed in that culture, even in America, growing up. But then when you fly over there and you're like, this is so strange. How can a country that I wasn't even born in feel so much like home?
Hmm.
And it felt like home because I smelled what all the foods that my mom made for me growing up, right? That fresh steamed, you know, rice, and then you hear everybody speaking the, you know, the native language, and you're like, oh my God, it was like heartwarming. And then you listen to the music and you're like, that's the music my parents would, you know, listen to when they dance and stuff. So it's like it was so weird because like this place is supposed to be foreign to me, but yet it's so I feel so at home here. And God, I didn't want to leave. It was absolutely just, I recommend it for everyone who has, you know, background in heritage in Lao, because uh, you gotta be there with the people and see how humble they are and how they are so happy with the basic things that we need in life, right? Like food, shelter, family, and love. And then we're over here like, oh, I want the Audi, I want the expensive house, I want, you know, I want to go on these trips. Oh, my job isn't good enough, you know. So we're over here and we live such a different set of priorities. And you go over there and it's like it's humbling because you're like, they're so happy and there's so much love. And I got to tell you, I didn't want, I just wanted to stay for a year if I had to. But yeah, so really, really good experience. And I definitely recommend it.
And did it feel surreal in any way? Because, you know, as Lao Americans, we are so used to growing up straddling the lines between being Lao and being American. You know, at home is Lao, but you go to school, you go anywhere outside of the home, it's all American.
Mhm.
Anywhere outside of the home is all American. But yet, when you're at Laos, everything outside is Lao. It's
Yes.
like your home is now outside.
Yes.
Surreal.
Yeah, it was surreal. It felt like, um, I mean, a best way to put it is my mom's sister, so my aunt. I looked at her and she looks so much like my mom. She talks like my mom. She's so similar to my mom, but except the only difference is she's a little darker and more rougher around the edges, and she works on the farm. So I look at her and I say, that's what my mom would be if she didn't come to the States. You know what I mean? Like that's a spitting image of what she would be. So just the way they're living out there, and really just kind, it's almost like a reality check too, you know. It's like you know, I came home and I was like, I really need to be grateful for what we have. And also here in the States, we're not exposed to how big our family is. We're always told how big our family is, but you know, all you see is just your immediate right here, right? Which for me is just my mom, dad, brother, sister, and my daughter. But we're just here, and everybody else, like all the aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody's all over there. So out of sight, out of mind. But once you go there and you're surrounded by everybody, it's just overwhelming because you're like, hey, like I look like you, and like it's just yeah, it's such a rewarding experience, and so important to have. So
That is an experience that I just hope to have so soon one day. I mean, I haven't gone to Laos yet, and I really, really want to. It's
yeah.
something that I hope to have soon, and I think it's going to be in January 2022. That's what I'm hoping for. And I don't know if I could go for a month because of, you know, work and stuff, but I wish I could. I'm going to try to make a month happen. But
Yeah.
yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And if you guys are just tuning in, for all of those who are just tuning in now, this is Who We Are, Laotian American Virtual Series. I'm Vakanda Wangafe,
I'm Chase McDara.
and
I'm
here
Amber.
and yep, and here with us is Amber Inthavong, a first generation Lao American born in Boulder, Colorado, who is a freelance writer, a publisher, an outdoor adventure blogger. Now, Amber, I want to talk about your more about the challenges you face. You know, as a Lao American coming up, freelancing, pitching stories, lining up all of your freelance articles to make money? Was there any struggle with that? You know, because I know there's a lot of people out there who really want to drop everything and just start writing. But I know as a freelancer, it can be really hard. You know, you
Sure.
have to line up all of your gigs in place, and you know, sometimes you won't even get a paycheck for 3 weeks out, because you gotta like, you know, do it in advance. But I'd love to learn about the challenges you faced and all that, and the lessons that you learned.
I think that when we follow a lot of influencers or we read books that are motivational, the misconception is that people say, "Oh, just put your fear aside and just go for your dreams and like and that's it, you got it." But the reality is that when you go after your dreams, it's not picture perfect right away. It's going to be really hard work, doing work. I mean, do it for me. It was doing work for free, offering to do pieces for free, telling them, hey, no strings attached. I just want my name on the byline and I want to get it out there. And there's also tons of rejection. I will say that where we live in a world where things aren't always fair, and sometimes some of the most talented people don't get chances. So that's something that kind of the less glamorous side that people need to be aware of is that if you're making that leap and you're hitting these hurdles and you're getting a lot of rejection and you're not getting paid for your work for a while, that's not a sign of failure. What that is that's a sign of growth. That's a necessity. You have to go through that so that you can get to the point of starting to make some tangible income doing it. So I think that the difference between the difference in what makes someone successful is having the willingness to fail. You have to be willing to be rejected and to fail in order to you know have enough inside of you to overcome that and keep going forward. I think the people that fail and say, oh, it's not working out because I'm not seeing the results, I'm just going to go back to what I was doing, that's too easy, right? So some of the most successful people that we know in this lifetime are people that didn't listen to what people were telling them and didn't accept any rejection. So um, just an example of that is, if I went around and said, hey, will you publish my book? Will you sponsor my book? Can you help me get this published? Everyone in the world could have told me no, but then no big deal. I'll just find a way to publish it myself. So,
Yeah, and another thing too with that, Amber, I feel like there's another layer to that, right? Like there's your own like internal conflict with like how am I actually going to get this done, but also the added layer of like being an Asian American woman and also like having to fight those barriers to make sure that you're fighting for also visibility for yourself, but also visibility of like your story, what it means to be Lao American, right? And so I think that's also an added layer with sort of, I think in general with a bunch of people we've spoken with in this series as well as like how do we get our community to be represented in mainstream media, and the way that that's just an added layer to sort of what we face on a daily of like trying to get representation, visibility amongst the monolith of what is quote unquote Asian America, right?
yeah, I mean, that's another topic I can talk about for like an hour. um, I mean, okay, so I mean, growing up, I'm sure that a lot of people can relate to this. I would watch movies like Pretty in Pink and Molly Ringwald and then a lot of these characters that if ever there was an Asian character, it would be an Asian character that was depicted as almost like unintelligent, right? Like they can't speak English well, or they're goofy, or and then if females were in those in any roles in films, it would be maybe as sexual objects or something like that. But I never saw that women like us were playing the love interest, or that the guy was ever interested in the Asian girl, right? Or that the girl was ever interested in the Asian guy. I never saw that. So representation is important for those very reasons. You mentioned the internal struggle, and I think that that intertwines with, we go about and I'm like, I don't see anybody else that looks like me that's doing this, and like, do I really have a place here? Is like, do I have a right to be here? Is this should I go? Like, so, but that, like I said, that's all the more reason to be there. You have to, like I said, kind of have blinders on again and say, you know what, I have to have unwavering faith that this is what I want, and I'm going to stop at nothing to do it. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You have to be, kind of mentally strong and emotionally strong to really, you have to be so convinced that it's for you, that no matter what people say and no matter what internal struggle you have, it doesn't set in. So it's that kind of like commitment to yourself and convincing yourself, right? So
And how do you go about in having this strong belief in yourself, this strong conviction in who you are, where nobody can break your barriers? Is it, what do you do on a day-to-day basis to remind yourself of who you are?
I'm willing to do everything possible. So that would mean waking up early, making an entire list of like, okay, what needs to get done? What projects do I need to be working on? Because whatever you complete that day is going to get you one step closer to what your goals were the next day. And you can't sleep on yourself. You can't, it's this constant need to like keep yourself going and busy. And sometimes when you get to the point where you're so overly busy, there's almost no room to be thinking about all of those doubts. You just do. um, I'm glad that you brought this up as well. It's that confidence is so important, because you can sit there and have like all these ideas of like, I dream of this and I really want to do this, and there's all these wonderful ideas and plans to do a podcast or to write a book, or all these ideas, right? But the ideas just sit there until you bring confidence into it, so that the confidence can kind of bring it into fruition. If you don't have confidence, the ideas just stay in the basement. They just, they don't go anywhere. So that confidence is like that constant self-love and self-talk to yourself, that you're saying that, I'm going to stop at nothing. This is for me. I'm claiming it, and no one can tell me any different. You have to talk to yourself through that the entire way, because like I said, those ideas just stay in the basement until your confidence brings it
And it,
through.
se-
So
and it seems like when you do have that confidence to bring your ideas into fruition, or to give birth to your ideas and to see it evolve and exist in front of your eyes, that's beyond just a figment in your mind, it seems so spiritually rewarding.
oh my gosh, in terms of writing, I will say that when your name's on the byline and something comes in print and you're holding it and you're like, that's my name right there, those are, it's almost like a high, because it's like you start feeling like, oh my God, I could die tomorrow and my name's like on these, magazines and websites. So that's the reward, is to be like, okay, each little article I did, or even if it was like 300 words or 500 words, or somebody posted it to their blog or what have you, over time, I kept seeing my name in these little projects, and it kept reassuring me that, yes, this is possible. Yes, things can get published with your name on it. Keep going. And then before you know it, like I said, you have a book of like, okay, these are all the magazines and websites I've done. So uh, that helps too, is kind of those little confirmations for yourself,
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, I can do this. This is possible. So
And I know we'll bring it up soon. The TLP, the Lao project, and narrative portrait that you did. We're gonna bring up that video. But I know that the way your future outlook on this is to write more, to expand, and to keep traveling.
right.
So I can't wait to see where else you go, where else you write. But yeah, let's take a look at your
Okay,
narrative
sure.
portrait here. So, Amber, before we go on and talk about what you see more as the future and what more you want to see for others in the future, I'd love to learn about just, a little bit more about all the places you've traveled. If you could just name the cities and countries and your favorite place that you've been to and, what you enjoyed
Sure.
about it.
Oh gosh, well, in the state of Colorado alone, it's I've lost count because the thing about our state is we have, the Rocky Mountains in the west, and whether it's, lakes or mountains or plains, we have all of that. And so I've been every corner, and there's lots of hidden gems all over our state. Um, in terms of domestically, I've been, to great major cities like Brooklyn, Miami, LA, Austin, Phoenix, Utah. And then internationally, Dominican Republic, and then Laos and Thailand was really wonderful, and Mexico as well. So I did a lot domestically. I think it really began for me because I was doing all this stuff locally in Colorado, and I was that informational, you know, resource for people to know where to go and what to do in my state. And then as I started to travel like alone to other domestic states, I was like, oh, I kind of, it's interesting to see how culturally different like Brooklyn is from Denver, right? So then I started to really want to do a lot of domestic travel. So I did that for a couple of years, and then after that, international is just life changing because you start kind of buzzing, and you're like, now I want to go to Greece and Spain and South America. So you get a little taste of it, and then it's like a potion. You're done because you don't want to go all the time. So
Right. For a question for me, just wanting to you talked about well, at least you're giving a lot of wisdom and sort of knowledge that you're sharing with us tonight, and so I wanted to ask as well, sort of I know that you're a parent as well, and so um, going back to just hinting about the lessons, you've been sharing a lot about sort of how you've made it as a writer, or sort of the commitment to self, and wondering how you sort of got yourself to sort of teach yourself that, or go through the methodology of like learning how to go through life in that sort of way, and if it's ever influenced by your parents and their teachings of being Lao, and do you sort of imbue that into your parenting for your daughter?
oh, that's a very good question. That's good. I wasn't ready for that one. I think that well, first off, if if your parents immigrated here from Laos, then I'm quite confident to say that they came from a history of trauma and a very hard past. And again, going back to survival. So when it comes to confidence and believing in myself, I'm not certain that that really came from teachings of my parents. I will say that I felt a responsibility to my parents, that if they had done all of this to make sure that we had these opportunities, then coming here and giving us all these opportunities in America, then we need to make sure that we're making the best of that, right? Because for them, it was they're opening the door for us, so it's our job to walk through it. And so I will say that they're responsible for that part. In terms of like confidence, I think that in a lot of ways as a kid, I felt broken down. I felt not enough, and I felt that I was insufficient. So I went through like years of that, right? And then I came into adulthood, and I was like, no, screw that. Like that, it's never been that I wasn't enough or I'm not sufficient. It's whatever I say it's going to be. And so you kind of get this almost like, you get a little tough because you're like, I'm just over it. I'm over not being American enough for you, or not being, like not being loud enough. I'm just gonna be, and I'm gonna be unapologetic about it. And I think that almost just comes with age. And you just get kind of fed up with like this entire childhood of like not quite belonging in one place or another, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
my my daughter, bless her heart, I had her so young. So um we kind of grew up together, and she watched a lot. She watched me break down, she watched me struggle, and trying to support us and stuff like that. And I did every kind of thing to support us and keep a roof over our head in jobs that I didn't want to do. But now that with her being a little older, I said, okay, it's time that mom starts doing the things she does want to do. And she supported that 1,000% and encouraged me. And there's been times where, I was like, oh, I thought I could write a book, but forget about it. And she has said, you've come so far. You need to just, what do you always tell me, mom? So it's not perfect. I think that I had to have a little bit of that, nudge and encouragement too. So in a lot of ways, she kind of teaches me. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow. Well,
That's
that is
really interesting. Go ahead, Wakanda.
no, no, that's really heartwarming, especially because you mentioned that you had her so young and that you grew up together,
yeah,
and how you guys both taught each other, and it's like a weave of lessons that you guys could learn from each other and really take away from each other, and
yes.
that is so great. I want to
Oh,
know.
it was, yeah, very very difficult. Like growing up, just like I said, being so young because I was like going to college at night and then working like not so good jobs in the day, and then well, basically, I go to like I remember I worked in a factory that had fiberglass, and I was making like $8 an hour, and this was when I didn't have my degree yet. So I was like, doing that in the day, and then and fiberglass is really hard. It's really hard work on you, and then I'd get her, and then come home, and then make sure that we had dinner, and then I put her to bed, and then after that, once she's in bed, I start my schoolwork for my master's degree at like 11 o'clock midnight. And then I'd go to bed about 4. And I wake up and do it all over again. So, you go through these parts where you're like, oh my God, I feel whittled to nothing. And I feel like this small. And I feel like I don't know how much longer I can hang on. And I think because she saw me continuously wake up every day and continuously keep doing it, whether I liked it or not. And then, so now I'm reached a point where, I'm 34, and when there are times that I do want to give up, she's like, nope, that's not you. That's not what I've seen from you. That's not how you've modeled things growing up. So you know better than that. So she really helps remind me.
Wow, she really helps to remind you, especially on hard days like that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's just a. I think from all our conversations that we have in this series, is I think it's a testament to sort of the resilience of our community, right? And I think you're a great embodiment of that sort of notion that our community, came from being survivors. We're, a young 45-year-old, refugee American diaspora community, and so um, we're coming from survivors and moving towards go-getters, hard workers, being achievers, right? And so, you know, just hearing from you speaking on that behalf is really inspiring, and I hope everybody that's watching as well gets a piece of that, because I think that's something that we can celebrate about our community, is that we're growing a lot, and the things that we can do if we just go for it, what you can achieve and succeed in.
Yeah, I'm actually so impressed coming into, yeah, I'm a millennial generation. My daughter is the Gen Z. So I come in and I'm like, wow, look at these like Lao YouTubers and entertainers, comedians, dancers, TikTokers. I'm like, that is what I want to see. That's really encouraging, because who would have thought that we'd be here today and seeing that, and people creating their own life by their own means, and that's going to get them a long way, is kind of taking those bold moves and putting themselves out there.
And you're one of them. You're one of them. You're putting content out there, you are publishing, you are traveling, you are really putting your voice out there and giving us a sense of who you are every time we read your articles, and it lives on. So I do want to have Chase, if you could pull up, we have a photo of all of your portfolio.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, of where you published, and it's just amazing, all the work that you've done. I mean, the beautiful photos, this right here, tell us about all of this. If you could tell us about any of these publications that really, really want to get into, about places that you've traveled and just your
Yeah.
favorite places.
So, like at the top, up top left hand corner, there's a picture of me when I was a kid, and I think that was in Boulder, um, and that was, me just having a narrative about, what it was like to try to come out on my own and become become my own person and become a blogger. And it's a little more vulnerable of a piece.
Let's click
And
that and see if we can scan your writing. The click on her
yeah,
for
you look, yep,
yeah.
perfect. And then, yep. So this piece was, published in the Seed Project. So, um, really about identity, and I also give a little bit of background about communism and what it means when your parents are from that, and then, you know, coming into to my own as a writer now. So this was really just kind of growing up and being American enough, growing up being Lao enough, and it's cute. I like it because it's really authentic and a little more vulnerable piece. So I like that a lot. As for the other pieces that are listed there, they're just kind of it just gives people an idea of my portfolio in like like Asian Avenue magazine, the Asian food edition. That was really important to me because I did an entire write up about Lao cuisine, and I feel that, especially in Colorado, that Lao cuisine is like highly underrated. A lot of people don't know about it. A lot of people aren't exposed to how wonderful Lao cuisine is. And so that was my time to really, showcase how awesome Lao food is. And, I provided pictures of the type of tools we use in the kitchen. So pestle and mortar, right? So that we can thumb. And then the basket for steaming the sticky rice, like all these tools that people are like, what the hell is that? So yeah, so I really like that. That was really fun to do. Um, and then, and then my book, and then I did a lot of,
So
I
you
started off really just writing about outdoor adventure. And then as I kept writing for magazines, they started to have me write, like expand out and write about cuisines now, and write about charity, and write about, like I did a Denver distillery bucket list to, try out different
Mm.
whiskeys in the state. Um, I highlighted like a outdoor rental company that a startup business. I wrote about the important people in the community that build hiking trails for us. Like people don't think about that, right? They go on a hike, they're like, oh, cool, there's this trail here. But what you don't realize is like volunteers are volunteering like days for them to bring a backpack out and literally like crack rocks open to move boulders. And like they make that nice little path for you. And people don't really think about that when they're enjoying a hike, right? So all of the things that like I genuinely want to write about, I just I just did. I just say I won't and I will. So that's the mentality you have to have.
well, thank you so much for that. Thank you for really representing and putting your writing out there.
Yeah.
It's such a unique voice that you have, such a unique perspective that you have that is definitely worth being shared and reading about. And what's really cool too is that you are a publisher. Tell us about your book, and we'll pull up the book here too so everyone could get a
Yeah, I have
glimpse.
it too. I have it. Yay.
Love
So this book is, I'm glad we're talking about it. Like this book is a little unique because it doesn't talk about outdoor adventure. It doesn't talk about the things that I typically would talk about, right? Exploring and info and all that. This book is totally different. And what inspired me to write it is I reached kind of my bottom. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I doing with my life? This was the moment that I decided to leave finance. And I had a lot of conflicting things going on in my life, and trying to figure out, what am I supposed to be doing? Where am I supposed to be? And so I wrote this book. And Glow Up is about making the right choices and the right moves in order to control your destiny. So it's about what is your environment like right now in terms of the people you surround yourself with. The kind of messages that they have. Are they people that spend their weekends drinking? Are they people that speak negatively to you? Are they people that aren't really going anywhere with their lives, and they're kind of discouraging you to move forward? I also talk about a little bit what we discussed earlier today is kind of being aware of the dialogue you have with yourself, right? And making sure that you're fearless in all of the choices that you decide to make. Um, and so it's really just an empowering book. And I get deep in it. I mean, I talk about like bad relationships. I talk about moments when I felt like nothing. I talk about, it's a very, very vulnerable book as well. So my hope really is that people read this book and they realize the importance of self-love and self-respect. And that really is the key to unlocking, you know, your next moves into pursuing who you want to be.
And where would you say that you really drive your self love and self confidence from, especially when you're around people who are discouraging, who are not rooting for you, who are telling you to just work to make money and who cares about doing
Yeah.
what you love? You're not worth it. There's nobody out there like you. How do you, where do you draw from? Is it, do you have like a favorite superhero on TV that you draw from? Where do you draw all that energy to really, fight back mentally and say, I'm going to glow up from this and I'm going to write a book about it. And I am that person to write. I am that person that I want to be.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'd like to say I have role models. There are, you know, a few on women, female that are entrepreneurs that I do look up to. But really, I think that it took me to hit my bottom to realize that at the end of the day, all you have is yourself. And so it was either, am I going to drown in this and sink, or am I going to swim? And so a lot of it, when you hit bottom, it's like you have to go back to the drawing board and be like, okay, what are the things that I've accomplished in the past up to leading up to this point? You have to sort of kind of remind yourself, like, what did I go through to get to where I am right now? Um, you know, reminding yourself of like who you are, and not forgetting that. And then um, I feel like this might not be the best answer, but it was the best answer for me. Is that the answer is always yourself. It's
Mm-hmm.
always yourself, whether you lose friends or you go through breakups or you lose a loved one. At the end of the day, the answer is always yourself, because no one's gonna come in your house and pick you up off your floor and you know, say, okay, I'm gonna carry you through this. It really is only you. And it's a decision. You have a deciding factor, like, okay, am I just gonna let myself be miserable and unfulfilled, or am I going to make some choices to feel as good as I can? And you know what? That's some of the most difficult things for people to do.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And before we spend time talking about your future and where you see that's going, it
Yeah,
seems like the advice that you could give to our audience here is when you hit rock bottom, it's so important to go back to the drawing board and make those lists of their accomplishments and all the small wins that they've
yeah,
had in their life, because that's really going to boost them up. Would you say?
yeah. I gotta tell you, I'll be on the phone with girlfriends and cousins, and I'll say, "Listen to me. You remember who the hell you are? You remember. You remember. You feel like you're when you're going through bad things. You're in the moment right then and there. You're presently in your misery, right? You're present in your misery. But then I talk to people on the phone, I'm like, do you not remember that you raised this many kids, and that, you know, that you've been through worse than this, and I've seen you pick yourself up. And then that friend that reminds you of stuff like that. And this is a very human thing, is that it's very human. We all do it. Okay. So in the present moment, all we focus on is the failures we made in the past, and then we have anxiety about what's going to happen in the future.
Mhm.
And the thing is that that doesn't resolve anything. Why are we not people who think of all the wonderful things we've accomplished in the past?
Mhm.
Why are we not people that remind ourselves, okay, well, dang, I went through a lot to get here, and all of the wonderful things I have right now, I'm really grateful for. We don't think that. We're always thinking about, oh, the future, I don't have this, I still don't have this. You get married and you're like, oh, but we don't have kids. And then you have kids and you're like, oh, but I don't have my freedom. Everything you accomplish, you're still thinking you're always without. So I think that it's so important to be aware and
Mhm.
be grateful for where you are and how far you've come. I don't care if it was, something small or something huge. You're somewhere. I mean, it took something to get where you are right now, and
Well,
you have to go through
thank you
something.
so much for that. And before we move on, I'm sure our audience has so many questions for you. So before we move on to our questions, we do want to let the audience know that we will put in all the links to follow your work. But I want to hear about what you see for your future before we move on to questions from the audience.
I want to definitely, I mean, it's a weird time right now with the pandemic, but the moment that we all got back from Laos, I knew I was like, Arnett, we're gonna hit Greece next. And then I wanted to make plans for that. And then we had so much that happened over, 2020 and coming into this year. So I'm gonna take pause and replan that. But I definitely, once everything's good to go, I definitely want to take a lot more, international trips. And there's almost like I wanted to add too is that traveling alone is amazing. Like when I was younger, you'd ask the younger me, like, "Oh, would you ever travel alone?" I'd be like, "Hell no." But now you ask me now, and I'm like, "Hell yes," because traveling alone is so amazing. You get to eat what you want, wake up when you want, go do what you want. You don't answer anybody, and then also you discover a lot about yourself when you're in a different element, right? You're like, okay, now I'm in survival mode. I got to make sure that I'm careful and I go here and I do this and I have an itinerary. So I have a lot of plans to continue to travel alone and travel with, maybe loved ones as well. But yeah, I definitely want to branch out to a lot of international destinations. So
Thank
That's super
you.
exciting to hear, and I'm hopefully, once this pandemic is over, we can really see the full front of your work and really explore sort of where you visit through your lens, and definitely encourage people to travel to Colorado as well.
yeah, I want to encourage people to go outside of their comfort zones. I mean, you're talking to a girl that went to Brooklyn and taught herself how to take the subway to Manhattan. Um, I went to Utah by myself as well. I mean, it's just like you have to be uncomfortable in
Mhm.
order to kind of grow in any way, and that encompasses everything. Whether it's
Right.
like you're working on your health, well, that's uncomfortable, right? You're going to be sore and things like that, or you're working on um, you're working on kind of trying different things and it's like awkward for you, it's unfamiliar. That's all about growth, so you have to like how it's almost like have a continuous discomfort, but it's rewarding. That's what makes us who we are. So builds us.
Definitely.
Good for
We do
you.
we do have time for a couple questions, so let's take some questions from the audience.
Yeah. So this one's from Angel. Amber, do you have any pre-writing rituals? Is there anything specific you do that sparks your inspiration and ideas for writing?
It's kind of insane, like I look like a mad person. I what I do is like I envision myself like, okay, what kind of message am I trying to communicate to the reader? How do I want that reader to feel?
Hmm.
And how do I want this reader to receive the message? The thing about writing is a lot of us feel like, oh, I'm writing them in by my means and the things I want to say. But the reality is that you're thinking about the reader. You're thinking about how do I want them to receive this? What do I, and if I'm writing something deep, what do I want them to really get about me? And then I contemplate it really well, and then when I start writing, it's really just like, okay, I visualize these like bullet points that like I really want to make sure I emphasize this topic, and I really want to make sure that I don't forget to brush on this one story and situation that happened. And then it's all just kind of this messy outline, and then after that, when I'm like, okay, I think I'm set and good about what I want the reader to see and what I want them to understand. So then now I sit down and I say, how do I make this come full circle? And how do I communicate this message? Um, and then that's when it's kind of like the work goes in, right? And you don't worry about the editing, you don't worry about what it sounds like, you just got to spill. And then after you
Hmm.
spill, you go back and you know, make it flow and things like that. So I don't know if my advice is the best to give because it's kind of like, I don't know, it's like messy. But yeah, it's, I think the best message to get right here is like, what are you trying, what do you want that reader to feel? What do you want that
Mm-hmm.
reader to know? And then and that's always good start.
Great. What do you want the reader to feel and what do you want the reader to know? Nice.
Yeah.
Let's go on to the next question.
So this one comes from Anthony, and I'm going to add a little bit to it as well. So he asks, is there any film or show you recommend that has great representation or strong characters in the Asian American community? And to that, also in literature as well.
Asian American. Sorry, repeat the question.
So are there any films, shows, or literature that you've sort of came across that has great representation of Asian American characters, community that has sort of inspired your work as well?
Yeah, in film, God, I wish I had a good reference in film. But you know, when an interesting thing that I kind of came across is that we need to be paying a lot more attention to, you know, what types of films that we see and books that we read, and try to understand like where is the source coming from. You know, a lot of like Asian stories are written by um white people, so really like I think it's so important to prioritize like, okay, I need to be reading from directly from the source of an Asian writer, or directly from the source of, you know, an Asian, you know, director, or who wrote the screenplay. So it's so important to do that. I think that a lot of us don't realize it. And unfortunately, I haven't seen a lot of, you know, Lao American or you know, directors or screenplays that have been out there. So it's really disappointing in that. I'm really, you know, kind of drawing a blank. And I mean, I wish that I had recommendations. And that's sad, is that we should have, you know, really good go-to resources for those types of, you know, things to read and see. I wish I had a better story. And by the way, I'm like so surprised when you say these names that it's not people like in my family that are asking these questions.
So
We
I
actually have we actually have people that I don't know that are in these in this dialogue. That's cool.
So, really quick, in the last few minutes that we have here, I do have one more question from a reader, Eliza Dewey, who read your narrative portrait. She asks, what advice would you give to someone else who want to do the same but was worried about the risk of, you know, getting over the fear of leaving a stable job to
Yeah.
follow your passion. So, yeah, really quick, and then right there we can follow up with how people could follow up with you.
Okay. That is a really good point, because, well, I mean, the reality of it is a lot of people don't have the luxury to say like, okay, I'm just going to leave my job and then I'm going to go and like be a writer and it'll be cool. You know, that's not the reality. For me, I had already had doubts of the career I was in for the last year. And so that last year that I was at that company, and I decided, okay, I'm going to quit this place, is the time when I was kind of like writing on the side, right? So I'd go to work all day, and then on the back end, I'd be like kind of emailing and calling, you know, editor in chiefs at different publications, or people a part of the editorial team at different magazines, and then I would pitch little stories. So really, the answer here is that I was doing it on the side, and then, you know, even if you just start with like one piece, one article, and you just or something that's in your community, that's okay too. And you just kind of, you know, start off with one piece, do it on the side, keep your day job. And then when you feel comfortable enough that like you know, you've built some pieces, and you're ready to kind of like take that leap, you'll know when that is. For me, I like beefed up my savings for a year. And then I remember I told my cousin, I was like, I'm going to quit my job. And she's like, what are you going to do? And I said, well, you know, I'm fine. I saved up money for, you know, a year, and I can always go back if it doesn't work out. So yeah, I definitely want to put that out there. It wasn't like I woke up and said, okay, bye job, and I'm going to go write. It was definitely a transition. So get your feet wet. talk to other writers, because what happens is you talk to other writers, they're in that world, they're going to introduce you to other resources. And that's how I got other writing opportunities. Sometimes those other writers will say, oh, hey,